They lied to you about how reality works. Since childhood, you were taught to trust only what your eyes can see, as if everything that exists were confined to the tangible. But there's something hidden within you that not only sees the invisible but recreates it, a point of perception so powerful that ancient civilizations built temples in its honor, and modern science is, quietly, beginning to rediscover it. Yet almost no one talks about it. We're talking about ancient knowledge, subtly erased from official history. An ancestral method, passed down through centuries disguised as myth, capable of activating a forgotten sense. The third eye. But what? Is it really? Just a spiritual metaphor? Or an actual portal to states of consciousness so deep they challenge everything you think of as self? There's a reason why this topic has always disturbed religious, philosophical, and even scientific authorities. In what follows, you'll understand why you've never heard about this, and how this secret could change everything. They were scattered across all corners of the world, peoples who never met, separated by deserts, oceans, and centuries. Yet they spoke of the same thing, an eye that doesn't see with light, but with truth. A point between the eyebrows that doesn't belong to the physical body, but to consciousness. Egyptians, Hindus, Mayans, Tibetans all seem to whisper behind their myths and rituals about the existence of a forgotten vision. How can we explain this convergence among such distant cultures? In ancient Egypt, the Eye of Horus symbolized more than protection. Its proportions match those of the pineal gland, a detail science would only notice millennia later. In India's Vedic scriptures, this eye was called the Ajna chakra, the center of subtle perception, a direct channel to the unseen reality. How did they know this? Without MRI, without neuroscience, without laboratories? Were they just inventing myths? Or tapping into something we've forgotten? Over time, this hidden eye became a symbol. And symbols, when repeated without understanding, turn into noise. But behind them, something remains. Monks isolated themselves in mountains to hear the sound of their own thoughts. Shamans ingested sacred plants and claimed to see with the inner eye. It wasn't hallucination, it was direct experience, something beyond common logic, yet treated with ritual seriousness. The haunting question is, why did we stop seeking? In the modern era, what was once spiritual was labeled as superstition. The inward gaze gave way to the outward focus, results, evidence, speed. And the third eye became just an esoteric concept, often ridiculed. But here's what's curious. Why have the most powerful institutions always feared this idea? Why has such ancient knowledge been systematically ignored, hidden, or distorted? Could it be that the true power of the third eye is something they'd rather you never discover? Because if this eye really exists, if it can truly be activated, then everything we know about perception, identity, and even time might be deeply incomplete. Maybe we're not trapped in an objective reality, but limited by a specific kind of perception. And what if there were a key to go beyond that limit, hidden at the very center of your own mind? A forgotten key, buried under centuries of noise and distraction? The question that lingers, echoing in the silence of pyramids and the chants of ancient temples, is simple and unsettling. Why were they all trying to tell us the same thing? And why are we only now beginning to listen? Hidden deep within the brain lies a structure the size of a pea, yet carrying millennia of symbolic weight. The pineal gland. For most, it's just an anatomical curiosity. For some scientists, a producer of melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep. But to the ancients, it was far more. It was the seat of the soul. René Descartes, father of modern philosophy, claimed the pineal was the point where body and mind meet. What did he see there that others ignored? Looking at its location, between the two hemispheres of the brain, it's hard not to draw a parallel with the third eye. It's not just symbolic. The pineal contains cells similar to those in the retina, responds to light, and, astonishingly, has structures sensitive to electromagnetic fields. But how is this possible? Why would an internal organ, enclosed in the darkness of the skull, need to react to light? Could it be detecting a kind of light the ordinary eyes can't see? Light that comes not from outside, but from within? And there's something even more provocative. Some studies suggest the pineal may synthesize small amounts of DMT, a natural psychedelic found in sacred plants used in shamanic rituals around the world. Reports from those who have experienced DMT are eerily similar. Perceptions of other dimensions, ego dissolution, a sense of connection with a higher intelligence. What if the pineal is the biological origin of these transcendent experiences? That would explain why so many cultures treated this point as sacred. Could the pineal be a spiritual antenna? A natural device for communicating with other realities, now dormant due to modern life? Perhaps it's no coincidence that today's fast-paced living, overstimulation, and chemical intake have a cumulative effect: the calcification of the gland. Over time, it hardens, losing sensitivity, as if it's being gradually silenced. What's striking is that modern science seems uncomfortable discussing this. The data exists, the patterns repeat, yet the topic remains on the margins. Why? Maybe because admitting the pineal's potential would force us to rethink everything we know about consciousness and about the limits of what we can perceive. The very existence of an inner vision would challenge the idea that only physical senses are real. But if the pineal truly is this forgotten biological key, what happens when someone fully activates it? The answer to that question isn't in science books. It lies in hidden accounts, intense experiences, and mysteries no one has yet been able to explain. Have you ever stopped to think that everything you call reality is, in fact, an interpretation? We don't see the world as it is. We see what our brain allows us to see. The light that enters the eyes isn't reality itself. It's just a signal, a frequency, that the brain translates into image. Sound is a vibration in the air, converted into electrical impulses. Touch, smell, taste, all filtered through the nervous system. So here comes the uncomfortable question: what's being left out? Neuroscience admits our mind ignores most of the available information. It selects, reduces, organizes. But based on what? On survival patterns. In other words, what isn't useful to the physical body tends to be discarded by perception. But what if most of the universe is precisely the part we ignore? What if our senses aren't showing us reality, only a convenient fraction of it? Ancient Vedic texts said the world is Maya, illusion. Not in the sense that nothing exists, but that what we see is only a projection of consciousness. Physicist David Bohm spoke of an implicate order, a deeper reality giving rise to the apparent. 1. Philosophy, physics, and spirituality converge at a dangerous point. Maybe we're trapped in a kind of perceptual theater, and the third eye could be the crack in the curtain. What's most curious is that third eye activation experiences always report the same thing: a break in linear perception. People describe seeing colors never seen before, energy patterns in objects, even emotions as living forms. Is that madness or access to a deeper layer of reality? The unsettling question is, are our five senses protecting us or limiting us? Imagine living your whole life inside a house with foggy windows. You get used to the blurry view, learn to trust it. But one day, someone wipes the glass, and everything changes. What once seemed solid now appears vibrant, dynamic, interconnected. Is that what happens when the third eye opens? Does it wipe the fog from our perception? If reality is truly a well-organized illusion, who organized it? And why can a few see beyond the veil, while most keep believing what their physical eyes show them? It's not just a relaxation practice. Meditation, when done with deep intention, is a way to tune the mind, like adjusting the dial on an old radio until you catch a clear signal through the static. The brain, in its normal state, vibrates in beta waves: focus, logic, productivity. But as the body quiets and the mind dives into emptiness, the waves slow down: alpha, theta, and in rarer cases, delta. But what exactly happens in these states? Science shows that theta waves are linked to out-of-the-ordinary experiences: inner visions, strong intuitions, sensations of presence. Small children naturally live in this state, which may explain their sensitivity to things adults no longer perceive. Strange, isn't it? As we grow and learn to see the world logically, we lose precisely the frequency that allows us to see the invisible. Meditation seems to be a way to reclaim that. But why? In the Vedas, ancient Indian texts, it was said that when the mind is silenced, it becomes a mirror without dust. And in that mirror, the universe reflects as it truly is. In Sufism, inner silence was considered a form of divine listening. In both traditions, the common point is clear. When you stop hearing the external world, you begin to hear what was always within. What have we been silencing all these years? And why, when we start to listen, does the third eye respond? There's something special in the moment when thoughts cease. It's as if a portal opens, sensations that defy explanation, images that arise without logical sequence, yet carry emotional weight. In those moments, the pineal gland seems to awaken. Some report a subtle pressure between the eyebrows. Others, a wave of heat or a pulsing light behind the forehead. Coincidence? Or a sign of an inner system starting to activate? Buddhist monks train for decades to reach deep meditative states. And some MRI studies show that in those states, areas of the brain linked to sensory perception decrease in activity, while areas related to pure consciousness light up. The mind withdraws, but perception expands. Isn't that strange? As if turning off the physical eyes activates another kind of vision. But why does that seem so unreachable to us? If the right frequency can open doors within the mind, who or what is waiting on the other side to be seen? Yim. 3 letters that together have crossed millennia, languages, and borders. But why was such a simple sound considered sacred by so many traditions? What's so special about a sound that vibrates through the entire body, even when repeated in silence? The answer may not lie solely in spiritual tradition, but in something modern physics is beginning to understand. Sound shapes reality, literally. Sound organizes matter. But could it also organize consciousness? Experiments in cymatics, the study of shapes produced by sound, reveal mesmerizing images, perfect geometric patterns created simply by vibrating sound on a surface. Grains of sand align into complex forms at the sound of certain tones. It doesn't seem magical, it seems intentional. So what if ancient mantras like OM were frequencies designed not just for the body, but for something much subtler? A kind of vibrational password to access a different level of mind? In that case, sound is not just heard, it's felt. It echoes in the bones, resonates in the organs, vibrates in the chest. The ancients knew this. That's why they chanted in caves, in temples with specific acoustic architecture, in groups, to amplify the effect. The repetition wasn't aesthetic, it was functional. Mantras weren't prayers, they were vibrational commands. Forgotten languages of the soul. What are we missing by reducing all this to superstition? Experienced meditators often describe something peculiar. The deeper the state, the more the mantra stops being vocalized and starts to become internal, as if it were vibrating on its own, in the center of the head. Could this be the pineal, responding to a frequency that activates its internal crystals? Because yes, it contains microcrystals, like tiny receivers or emitters, waiting for a signal. Could the mantra be the sound capable of making those crystals resonate? In Tibetan spirituality, it's said that certain words are not just symbols. They are sound forms of entities. They open paths, dissolve blocks, reveal dimensions. Does that sound too symbolic to be taken seriously, or too symbolic to ignore? The line between external sound and internal perception begins to blur. And when that happens, what once seemed like sound starts to feel like communication. But with whom? If certain sounds can open internal portals, and mantras are the keys, then the real question isn't, how does it work? But, where do they take us? There's a strange moment between sleep and wakefulness, where the body seems to shut down, but the mind remains alert. A gap so brief most people never notice it. In that threshold, thoughts dissolve into images, and images become sensations. Science calls it the theta state, a slower brain rhythm associated with deep imagination and emotional memory. But the ancients didn't see it as merely a mental state. They said a portal existed there, a direct access to the invisible world. Could that be why so many mystical experiences happen between dreams? In this state, the barriers between the conscious and the unconscious loosen. Linear thinking vanishes, and what emerges is fragmented yet deeply symbolic perception. This is where buried memories may surface, but also where inexplicable visions appear, images never seen before, presences that don't feel like products of the mind. Why do so many spiritual traditions, from shamanism to Christian mysticism, associate transcendental experiences with light sleep and borderline states of consciousness? Tibetan monks train to remain conscious while the body sleeps. They call it sleep yoga. In their practice, they claim the dream world is a direct reflection of the subtle mind, and that with enough training, one can perceive the hidden reality behind dream images. It may sound unbelievable, but sleep. Science already admits there are states in which the brain produces astonishing coherence. The mind becomes more integrated, more connected. But connected to what? Some researchers suggest that the theta state is the same state activated in deep hypnosis sessions, where the patient accesses forgotten memories, traumas, and in some cases, information they could never consciously know. This raises an uncomfortable question. Is there something greater that can be accessed in those moments? Something that hides precisely because we are always too awake, too alert, too rational. When someone consciously approaches the theta state, they often report a sensation of expansion, as if the body becomes light and time ceases to exist. The sense of self dissolves. Some feel an inner light, others a deep connection to something they can't name. Curiously, many also report a slight pressure in the center of the forehead, the third eye point. Coincidence, or a sign of a real activation taking place? If there is a place between sleep and waking where portals open, then what exactly is trying to reach us in those silent moments? And why were we taught to ignore that space as if it were just a mental blur? No one told you, but maybe you're consuming something every day that numbs your spiritual sensitivity. Not symbolically, but literally. Science already knows that the pineal gland, that small structure linked to what we call the third eye, undergoes a calcification process throughout life. But few stop to ask, why does this happen? And more importantly, who benefits from it? Fluoride, so present in tap water and common toothpastes, is one of the main agents linked to this calcification. Studies indicate that it accumulates in the pineal more than in any other organ in the body. Instead of stimulating its function, this element seems to crystallize it, blocking its activity. And yet, it's in almost everything we consume daily. Coincidence? Carelessness? Or a subtle containment method disguised as dental health? But it's not just fluoride. Industrialized food, full of additives, dyes, and artificial sugars, directly interferes with the body's natural rhythms. The pineal is sensitive to light, silence, and the body's cycles. It responds to rhythm, not constant noise. And what do we do today? We sleep late, surrounded by screens with lights on, acidic diets, and non-stop stimulation. We are, unknowingly, creating the perfect environment to silence what could most set us free. Interestingly, in ancient spiritual traditions, there were specific practices to cleanse the body before elevated perception experiences. Fasting, the use of herbs like turmeric, castor oil, and iodine-rich natural foods were common among initiates. Were these merely rituals? Or did these practices hold a hidden biochemical code designed to decalcify and reactivate the pineal gland? And if so, why was this knowledge pushed to the margins as mere superstition? Today, there is a growing interest in pineal detox, as if people are beginning to sense that something is wrong with the way we're living. But cleansing is only the first step. The real question is, what starts to happen inside you when the blockage is gone? When subtle vision returns? There are reports of intensified dreams, heightened intuition, perception of signs, and an almost physical sensation of inner activation. As if something that had been dormant begins to pulse again. But if we are surrounded by substances that silence this center of perception, is it just negligence? Or is there a hidden reason we're never meant to know what we might see if our eyes were truly opened? Have you ever wondered why certain symbols repeat, even among cultures that never encountered each other? Triangles, spirals, concentric circles, and at the center of it all, an eye. A solitary eye, often surrounded by light, sometimes carved atop pyramids. It appears on the walls of Egyptian temples, in the center of Hindu mandalas, in medieval cathedral, stained glass, and even on the dollar bill. What is this quiet obsession with the eye? And why does it always appear in the same place? High, centered, invisible? The answer may lie in geometry. Not the one from school books, but what the ancients called sacred geometry. A language that doesn't rely on words, but on proportions. The pyramid, for example, isn't just a static shape. It's an energy condenser, channeling force to the top. The apex, the point of connection between heaven and earth. Now think, what if your body follows the same architecture? What if the point between your eyebrows is the apex of an inner pyramid? Studies on the golden ratio, fractals, and geometric forms reveal something unsettling. Everything in nature, from DNA to galaxies, seems to follow specific patterns. And many of these patterns are embedded in ancient symbols associated with the third eye. Is it coincidence? Or did these cultures encode knowledge into symbols, like messages left for the future? Messages that perhaps only those who see with non-physical eyes can decipher. Across cultures, rituals were held at the geometric center of temples. Sound would resonate precisely. Sunlight would pass through windows designed with perfect mathematics. None of this was for beauty. It was functional. The architecture was crafted to induce altered states of consciousness. The temple was a spiritual machine, and you, standing within it, were the receiver. What might have happened when someone stood exactly at the center at exactly the right time? Today we reproduce these symbols in tattoos, prints, and artwork, but rarely stop to ask, what do they truly mean? What if the all-seeing eye isn't watching you, but inviting you to see? And what if geometry is not just form, but frequency? An activation code embedded in the very structure of the universe, waiting to be understood? And what if each of these sacred figures isn't just decoration, but a hidden reminder of something long forgotten? Something concealed, right in the center of your forehead. And maybe all it needs is to be recognized to begin to open. And what if the universe you see around you is just a reflection, a projection from something invisible, much deeper? It sounds like science fiction, but quantum physics is starting to explore this possibility. Scientists like David Bohm and Carl Pribram have suggested that reality may function like a hologram. Each part, contains the whole, and the whole is expressed in every part. But if that's true, where is the projection coming from? And more unsettling still, who is doing the projecting? Consciousness wouldn't just be a product of the brain. It would be the matrix behind experience itself. The brain would act as a decoder, a lens translating invisible frequencies into forms, colors, smells, and sounds. And what if the third eye is the part of the system that accesses the information the rest of the mind filters out? It wouldn't be an eye in the physical sense, but a direct receiver of reality before form, that which sees before the world appears. A hologram, by definition, is three-dimensional, but created from coded light. Light invisible to the ordinary eye. Curious, isn't it? The pineal gland is sensitive to light, even though it's completely enclosed in the darkness of the brain. What kind of light does it detect then? Could it be the light of consciousness? The light that generates the image, not just reveals it? Perhaps the third eye doesn't see the world, but sees the codes behind it, the invisible patterns, forming what we call reality. Reports from people in altered states, induced by deep meditation, psychedelic substances, or even near-death experiences, share a common thread. Everything seems to be made of energy, light, intention. The boundary between object and observer dissolves. Everything vibrates at a rhythm that cannot be heard, only felt. Are these experiences hallucinations, or glimpses of a wider reality that the third eye allows access to? Science still hesitates. Spirituality, however, has always claimed the world is a projection of the mind. Hermeticism said it long ago: the all is mind, the universe is mental. If that's true, then changing perception is changing the universe. And the third eye would be the point where that transformation begins, like an inner lens that reveals the source code of existence, but only activates when you start questioning everything you believe to be real. But if everything we see is a projected image, what happens when you turn off the projector? What remains there, in the dark, waiting to be seen without form, without color, without time? There's a strange, almost forgotten object once used by alchemists, magicians, and initiates of ancient secret orders. A mirror, but not an ordinary one. Black, opaque, made not to reflect appearances, but what lies behind them. The so-called black mirror wasn't just a divination tool. It was an instrument for contacting the invisible and, more importantly, the unconscious. But why did this practice vanish from public view? And why does it cause so much discomfort when it reappears? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The black mirror was, symbolically, the path to that confrontation. In it, the practitioner didn't see outer images, but inner projections, fears, hidden desires, deep archetypes. It was like looking into a well and discovering that something is alive at the bottom. What if the third eye is precisely this? Mirrored surface within us, turned not outward, but toward what lies beyond the visible world. In Egyptian tradition, the mirror represented a portal between worlds. And in alchemy, it was the symbol of the opus nigrum, the stage of inner putrefaction, where light could only emerge after darkness had been faced. This is where the third eye stops being a tool for external vision and becomes an instrument of self-transformation. It doesn't show you what you want to see, it shows you what is ready to be seen. And that is not always comfortable. This process is not just mystical, it is deeply psychological. By activating the center of symbolic perception, you begin to see the unconscious patterns that govern your decisions, your relationships, your most intimate fears. And as these contents surface, something changes. The reality around you begins to react differently, as if the world were responding to a new frequency emanating from within. But is this just psychology or something far beyond it? In this context, the third eye is not just a channel for clairvoyance, it is the mirror of what is hidden. And perhaps that's why so many people fear opening this vision, because it demands courage to see what has been denied for an entire lifetime. You cannot see the invisible without first facing the shadow that covers it. And what appears in that mirror can both liberate and destabilize. The question isn't whether you're ready to see, but whether you're ready to no longer be able to look away. But if the black mirror reveals what's behind appearances, what exactly is reflected there when no one else is looking? Have you noticed how certain dreams, even brief ones, remain etched in your memory for years? An animal staring intensely, an endless staircase, a child saying something you never forgot. These images seem meaningless to the logical mind, but they speak directly to a deeper, older part, the subconscious. It doesn't speak in words. Its language is made of symbols, sensations, and living metaphors. And this is precisely the language the third eye understands. But why was it forgotten? The subconscious is like a secret archive, storing traumas, desires, and information beyond conscious awareness. Freud studied it, Jung interpreted it, but the ancients, they spoke with it. They used rituals, sacred symbols, geometries, and colors to access those hidden files, not to control them, but to integrate them. The third eye, in this sense, would be the interpreter, the bridge between the outer world and that invisible sea of meaning. The point where the symbol becomes real perception. When activated, the third eye doesn't transmit images like a movie screen. It projects meanings, archetypes, emotional vibrations. That's why people who undergo mystical experiences often can't explain what they saw, because what was felt was deeper than any literal image. It's like trying to translate a symphony with words. It's like seeing a formless truth. And what if that's actually the soul's original language? In rituals across various cultures, symbols were placed at the center of temples or drawn onto the body of the initiate, not as decoration, but as visual keys. Each symbol activated an aspect of the deep mind. The eye, the serpent, the circle. Everything had a purpose. But over time, we stopped asking what these images mean to us, here, now. Are third eye visions merely vivid dreams, or encrypted messages from the very core of consciousness? The subconscious is powerful because it shapes our reality silently. It influences what we attract, what we fear, what we repeat. By accessing it consciously, we can change the commands that program our experiences. And that's where the third eye becomes a tool of creation, not just perception. Seeing is the first step, but understanding is the beginning of transformation. What other images might be waiting inside you, ready to be decoded? But if every symbol seen through the third eye carries a message, who or what is sending these messages? And what will happen when you finally understand what they mean? You've been programmed, not by a machine, but by the invisible repetition of the world around you. Since birth, you've heard the same words, been exposed to the same fears, had your beliefs shaped by stories that were never yours. And now, as a reflection of all this, you live a reality you believe to be unchangeable. But what if reality isn't a fact, but a consequence? And if you change what you carry inside, could the outside world begin to reorganize too? Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reconfigure itself. It was once believed that neural connections were fixed. Today, we know. They change with repeated thoughts, emotions, and intentions. The brain is like a moldable mirror, adjusting to what you believe and feel. Now imagine what happens when that reprogramming comes from the center of consciousness, from a deep point of perception beyond the ego. Could the third eye be that command center? In ancient practices, awakening the third eye wasn't just about seeing beyond, it was about creating differently. The wise knew, what you hold within, you manifest without. When this subtle perception is activated, reality no longer seems random. Events gain meaning, patterns reveal themselves, and what once felt like an obstacle becomes the reflection of a forgotten belief. Reality stops being the enemy and becomes a mirror. But are you ready to see the true reflection of yourself? Recurring thoughts become emotion. Sustained emotions become a state of being. And that state emits a frequency. Quantum physics suggests reality responds to frequencies. Particles behave differently depending on how they're observed. If the observer influences the observed, then the third eye, as the most conscious point of observation, would hold immense power. It doesn't just see the world, it informs the world of what it is. When you start to reconfigure your inner patterns, the ones operating silently in the subconscious, the world around you changes. People leave, new opportunities arise, synchronicities increase. But this isn't instant magic. It's a vibrational realignment. And in that process, the third eye acts like a tuner. The more aligned you are with who you truly are, the more the world reflects that version back to you. But if the third eye can reprogram how we perceive and even how reality responds, then what stops us from using it consciously? Who or what taught us to fear it as mere fantasy, when it might be the most powerful tool we have to change the world from the inside out? You think of someone, and they text you at that exact moment. You see the same number repeating everywhere. Clocks, license plates, receipts. You dream of a situation, and it happens the next day. Coincidence? Psychologist Carl Jung didn't think so. For him, this was synchronicity, events connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. What if the third eye is the inner radar that picks up on this silent language the universe is constantly whispering? These signs may seem random to the rational mind, but they carry an unexplainable emotional weight. It's as if the world is alive, conscious, trying to speak to you. But why do only some people notice? Perhaps because this kind of communication doesn't happen through logic or words, but through symbols, gut feelings, coincidences that stir something inside us. You have to be tuned in. That's where the third eye comes in. It doesn't just see, it recognizes. Ancient peoples believed the gods spoke through omens. An animal crossing your path, a shooting star, a recurring dream. Today, we've replaced those signs with notifications, but the symbols still appear, and those who awaken the third eye report a massive increase in synchronicities. It's as if the universe starts responding more often. But maybe it always was. And only now we're beginning to listen? Synchronicity doesn't follow linear logic. It speaks to the unconscious. A sentence at the right moment can shift your life. A seemingly mundane encounter can hold the missing spark. It's as if the universe leaves breadcrumbs on your path, hoping you'll notice. And when the third eye is active, those clues don't go unnoticed. They resonate inside. They awaken something that was dormant. But what is the purpose of this hidden dialogue with reality? Some say that when synchronicities increase, it's a sign of alignment. Others say it's the universe testing if you're truly paying attention. Either way, there's a clear sensation. You are not alone. There is an intelligence at work, not above, but around you, and maybe within. And the third eye would be the channel allowing more direct connection to this flow of existence. A flow not seen with open eyes, but felt with closed ones. But if the universe is speaking to you through signs, and you begin to understand the language, what exactly is it trying to say? And why do those messages seem to get clearer precisely when you begin questioning everything you once called coincidence? For centuries, the ancients kept certain practices in absolute secrecy, not out of arrogance, but fear of what could happen if the power were used without preparation. They were rituals, postures, sounds, and silent gestures repeated endlessly, always with one purpose: to activate inner vision. In occult manuscripts, medieval engravings, and fragmented reports from initiatory orders, the third eye appears as the peak of a process. But what exactly did they do? And why did they stop doing it? Among the Egyptians, priests spent years training in temple silence before touching certain symbols. In Tibet, the oldest lamas passed on visualization and breathing practices verbally, one said to awaken higher consciousness. Shamans would isolate themselves for days in total darkness, ingesting specific herbs while waiting for visions. In all these traditions, the awakening of the third eye was sacred, not just desired, but earned, a stage to be reached, not a shortcut to be hacked. Over time, these rituals were undone, fragmented, forgotten, or simply ridiculed. Modern haste swallowed the silence necessary to access them. Techniques that required inner discipline became subjects of shallow curiosity. And yet, in the accounts of those who dared follow the old steps, the results are consistent. Inner lights, sounds from nowhere, a presence beyond comprehension, and a sense that reality was being rewritten behind their closed eyes. These practices, however, are not just about concentration or faith. They involve the body in precise ways. Rhythmic breathing, pressure on energy points, sustained focus on a symbolic image. They are spiritual engineering, designed to generate an altered state of consciousness that activates forgotten parts of the brain. But why does no one teach this seriously? Is there fear of what people might find if those doors were truly opened? Few know that there are reports of intense practices that triggered irreversible transformations. People who never saw the world the same way again, who began to feel everything more intensely, who couldn't turn off what had been activated. In those cases, the third eye wasn't just a new way of seeing, it was a new way of existing. But are we truly ready for that kind of constant perception? If these rituals were abandoned not by accident, but as a form of protection, then what exactly was locked away behind them? And who holds the keys now? It's not just light. It's not just peace. Many describe the activation of the third eye as overwhelming, a total rupture of normality. Accounts from ordinary people, during deep meditation, prolonged silence, or extreme experiences, reveal the same pattern. An inner vision opens, and the world changes. Not outwardly, but inwardly. Colors gain new depth. Time slows down. Sounds once ignored become messages, but this sensitivity comes with a price. When the third eye opens, it doesn't choose what to show. It reveals, without filters, without ornaments, without the protective veils built by the ordinary mind. That's why some traditions warned, do not awaken what you are not ready to see. The problem isn't the eye, it's the content. Buried emotions, hidden traumas, extrasensory perceptions, subtle presences, all of it begins to emerge. And what was invisible becomes unbearably real. Are you willing to face that? Some describe ecstasy, others panic, because the opening of the third eye dismantles everything you thought you were. The ego, with its certainties and stories, doesn't know how to deal with the vastness that reveals itself. It's like opening a door to the infinite, while your feet are still stuck on the floor of daily routine. Suddenly, the physical world feels too small. The ordinary mind tries to rationalize, but no reasoning can stand against the raw truth of expanded consciousness. But what happens afterward? When the eye opens, it may not close, and that means living with a different kind of perception, more sensitive, deeper, more unstable. The price of inner vision is not just to see more, it's to feel more, to carry more, to perceive what others ignore. It's to live with the clarity that much of what is experienced in the common world is theater. And still, to keep playing your role in it, as if nothing had changed. How do you live like that? That's why the ancients prepared their initiates so thoroughly. Because they knew seeing is dangerous. Not because of what is seen, but because of what it demands. The awakening of the third eye is not the end of a search. It's the beginning of a responsibility, a vision that demands presence, truth, and surrender. You can no longer pretend you don't know. And that may be the hardest part, holding the vision when the world around you still prefers the dark. But if the third eye opens and everything changes forever, then who will you be when you realize you can never see the world the same way again?